So, um, this week I'm doing something different. I'm teaching something I haven't taught before. And I'll be talking about how to use GitHub project boards. But I'm going to be doing it in using a specific framework. And that is in the framework of thinking about how to do project management for complex projects, large, complex projects. It could be a solo project, but oftentimes, we're thinking about a project where we've got multiple people on the project. And the last 2 years have been heavily involved with something called NIMS OpenScapes. If you want to read about it, it's on the website here. I'll put the website back in the chat here. And these are trainings that we've been doing in NOAA Fisheries for our staff, and it's training them in improving scientific workflow and transitioning to reproducible and highly collaborative workflows. And one thing that's come up a lot in talking with, now hundreds of agency scientists is a desire for more training in like formal project management. So this is a step in that direction. And what I'm going to focus on in the next two sessions are what's called Agile methodologies or Agile project management. And these are ideas about how to manage projects that have, and the ideas came from, they really started, 1930s, really heavily influenced by theories in industrial quality control management, but they were heavily adopted by the software development industry. And today, the methods that I'll be talking about are ubiquitous across software development agencies. One particular method that you may have heard of, which is called Scrum, is pretty much like used all over. I've talked with my friends in who are in software development, and they said, it started like 2012. People started using this agile methodology called Scrum, and now it's like every job they've been in uses this way of organizing their projects. And so I'm going to be today introducing you to, this is number 3, introducing you to the ideas about Agile, the theories, what it's based on, and the 4 foundational elements of it, thinking on it. And then today I'm going to show you how to do what's called Kanban, which is a type of Agile methodology using GitHub project boards. This will be kind of our entry to this idea. Kanban's pretty easy. You don't really need to change the way you do things. It's just a matter of putting your task onto a board, and it'll help you get used to using GitHub project boards, how to do that. And then next week, we're going to go into Scrum. I'll teach you the basics of Scrum and then show you how you could do a Scrum sprint using GitHub project boards. Yes, Scrum does come from rugby. In fact, it does. You'll learn about that next week, Rod. Okay, so let's hop in here. Okay. So how that I'm going to structure it today is the first half is going to be lecture, and then the second half I'll jump in and we'll start working with GitHub project boards. But first, we need to talk a bit about these ideas because they are pretty different. Before I start in, if you want to learn more, there's so much information online, lots of videos. I'll put some links in the online notes after I finish lecturing on some of the courses I found particularly helpful. So first off, what kind of projects are we talking about? So as I said, these are complex projects. They're big projects. It's not something you can just, hey, write that email or do this thing. One thing is something big. It's something that may be really big, and it may be like really kind of hard to say exactly how you're going to solve all the problems. You need to make progress, and yet there's a lot of uncertainty about exactly how you're going to do it. Often these methods I'm talking about are especially helpful where you have team members. So you need to have really high functioning collaboration within the team to have a really effective project. However, I will say that these ideas can definitely be applied to solo work. They're just crucial if you have teamwork to be effective, but the ideas are definitely helpful for individual work. And if you were participating in last week's lecture where I was talking about branches, you will see an echo of some of these ideas and comments I made about, when you're working on branches, you want to do short branches and then merge back in. So you want to take a branch, complete a task, close the branch, do another task, complete the task, and come back in. That comment I made is echoing some of these ideas about how you should do work when you have a really big project. So rather than just having, let's just work on everything all at the same time. No, we don't want to do that. We want to be quite a bit more disciplined than that. Okay, so what is Agile and why is it different? Agile is, be able to watch the time here. Okay, so Agile is a lightweight framework for software development. So this term Agile came from the software development industry. It's now used much more widely. The term is used much more widely, but that particular term came from software development, even though these ideas themselves did not originate in software. What does lightweight mean? So lightweight means that it's a system that's just organized by some basic principles. It's not a whole bunch of rules. Oh, you got to do it exactly like this. Rather, it's an idea of, hey, if you kind of follow these basic principles, the system becomes self-organizing. It becomes this efficient system that kind of takes care of itself. But you have to have certain key elements for that to happen. And the key elements within Agile are rapid like a week, 2-week cycles of development. So it's not like we're going a year and then we kind of reflect back on, how much progress we made and how we're doing. No. This is like a week, or now my friends tell me in software development, the standard is like a 2-week cycle. Open team culture. So you're collaborating and everyone can see what everyone else is doing. And everyone else can see how other people are solving problems. So they can be like, oh, wow, hey, that could help me out. And a lot of peer help, peer learning. Sometimes a lot of this is direct by talking, but what we're seeing, like what in teaching with Git and GitHub, putting things up for your team, that's another way of communicating and sharing. Team reflection, crucial. And then so this emphasis on continual improvement, and it's not lip service in Agile, not at all. And then customer focus, which is getting a lot of input, and this is part of these short cycles too. So I'm going to talk about this and talk about kind of where these ideas came from, sort of give you the foundation. And so these are those 4 elements I was talking about. And so the iterative part, that's these short cycles of work. The self-organizing team structure is talking about team culture, and there's some very specific things, and I'll go through each of these. But like transparency, I talked about that. But another really huge part of this is what's called empowerment of individuals, so that the individuals on the team can decide what the next tasks are. And there's this big emphasis on learning. So peers teach each other to learn new tasks. Within science, I think like the empowerment of individuals, that's something we, I think as a scientist, I'm definitely used to that. That, we talk about the task and people take on the task they want. Within, when these ideas were developed in a much more kind of rigid or Dilbert-esque top-down hierarchical development, where somebody wouldn't be given the freedom to choose their task. They're just assigned, you do this, you do that. And what's different about this is that individuals are empowered to choose tasks, and also that the hierarchy becomes very flattened. So all staff members from the most junior to the most senior are kind of on this sort of even level, and are empowered to choose task and learn new material. Okay, but let's jump in and talk about the, where these ideas came from, and that'll help you understand them more. Before I do that, whenever you look up anything on Agile, you're going to see that they compare it to something called waterfall. And what is waterfall? So waterfall is perfectly fine way of organizing projects. Lots of projects are organized like this. We're certainly familiar with this in academia. We write a big proposal. It has all our detailed plans. And then we do the next step. We're going to go out, collect the data. And then we're going to go next year 3, we put it all together and analyze it. We make the output from the model. Okay. And then year 5, we write it up. So the problems with this are that we have these super long iterations. So the time until we get feedback can be just outrageously long. So if we made crucial flaws in our sampling design, we had this great idea, but hey, the plan meets the real world, right? We don't have time to fix it if we collected all the data and then we put it into the model. So that's kind of a real problem that happens. And secondly, I mean, if you just look at this, there's no explicit focus on how the team is going to be working together, and there's no explicit focus on learning cycles. And that's totally different in Agile. Agile is really focused on continual improvement and learning cycles. Okay, so let's go into where this came from. And the really big impetus was thinking that was happening in industrial design. William Edwards Deming was someone who worked in statistical quality control, and he was a really major thinker in the 1950s through the 1980s of how we need to change the systems by which manufacturing occurs to enable higher quality control. And he popularized this iterative cycle called the plan, do, check, act cycle, or he actually called it the plan, do, study, act cycle. It wasn't his original idea. It came from others, but he's the one who really popularized it, made it digestible, and taught a lot of workshops on it to industry. And if you search for PDCA cycle, you're going to see this all over. And these are really short learning cycles. And so the idea is you plan what you're going to do, you go do it, and then you check it, you reflect it, you study, and then you get better. And then you do it again. And so you have to keep doing these short cycles and thinking, reflecting, what are the problems? How do we fix those problems is crucial. And you're not trying to solve everything at once, because that wouldn't work. You just try to get a little bit better. So these incremental improvements, but always incorporating reflection into the cycle. You'll see this next week when I talk about Scrum. So they're on these 2-week cycles. At the end of that 2-week cycle, the team stops, reflects on what was going well in their workflow and what was not, and is there anything that what can they do to improve things. So Deming's ideas are really coming in here, this iterative and incremental development, and the idea that reflection, a learning cycle, is critical to the workflow. The second really important idea, and this actually came from Deming also, was something that's called lean manufacturing. And despite the idea, lean, what it actually is a focus on a different kind of team culture. And this is this empowerment of the individual, flattening the hierarchy. So that means, it's not like the people who are most junior are just like, given the task. Everyone is given power to make changes, to suggest things. In terms of if you read this book, The Toyota Way, the most junior person can stop the assembly line if there's a problem. And then everybody comes in and they try to fix it. So it's the lean manufacturing is talking about this change in the team culture and this idea of these systems that are self-organizing and self-correcting. And this is systems of people. So lean manufacturing is really focused on the human side of the team and the group dynamics and trying to get the group dynamics right so that the team can be very high functioning. So it's interesting. I said, again, this came from Deming. And it actually, these ideas were adopted much more widely in Japan than they were in the US. And what happened is that after World War II, Deming was sent to Japan to help them design their census and census of people. And then but he was an industrial engineer. And so he began giving these workshops and lectures to Japanese industrial engineers. And so it wasn't that long. It may have been only a summer that he was doing these workshops. And they really took off with that. And these ideas spread throughout the Japanese automotive industry. If you haven't ever read this book, it's a really fascinating book. If you don't want to read it, you'll see lots of 5-minute summaries on YouTube. So these ideas that are coming from the lean manufacturing are really focusing on this part of the Agile. It is the importance of thinking about the group dynamics and certain aspects of the group dynamics, which is like these flat hierarchies, continual learning, and really high intentional communication across the team. So what does that mean when I say that? That means like every single day the team is checking in. How's it going? What are you working on? What are the issues? That level of communication. It's not a really long meeting. It might be really fast, but this importance of like the team having one-on-one, like the human connection is super important. Third really big background was thinking in rapid software application development theory. So, here are some of the names involved in that. And so this is related to thinking by people who were developing sort of user applications, software, and they're in this situation where they're trying to design something, but it is literally impossible to write out a plan because they're developing something novel and they're developing something that interacts with a human. And they have this situation where they create something, a user interface, and they show it to the person. The person interacts with it. They see what they like and they don't like. But the user changes by interacting with the interface. the user becomes like, oh, used to certain things. So the user has changed. As the user is exposed to the product, the end user keeps changing. So there is literally no way you can come up with a plan ahead of time, because your end user changes when they are exposed to your product. And in this situation, they, again, it's these rapid iterations, and you have exposure of the product. So it's the idea that you make a working product, a minimal working product, that's a prototype, and then you get user feedback from that. You watch how the user interacts, and then you develop the new thing. So you are learning, and you have to keep exposing the customer and watch and seeing, getting feedback from the customer, so that the customer can kind of be organically responding to your product, and you can kind of respond to how they're responding, right? So it's a really interesting idea about how you innovate in highly uncertain situations. So here, this one's getting, a bit closer to what you'll see in, say, sort of the whole Agile framework and Scrum. And part of the reason like this is, it gets a little closer, I think, is like these people, those names I listed, they were at there was a 2001 meeting of all these visionary thinkers in software development. They all got together in Snowbird. It's like this famous meeting, and they wrote something called the Agile Manifesto. And it's basically the 4 principles are, these aren't the exact words they're using, but it's these basic ideas. And then they have these 14 principles. So lastly, this is related to some ideas that are from experiential learning. And these are ideas coming out in like 1970s, 1980s. I think these Agile thinkers must have been exposed to this. David Kolb's work was very popular. Still very popular. But it's these ideas that the activity itself is the teacher. That it is your exposure to the activity that is teaching you. But in order for this to work, you have to do this learning cycle. So you can't just do the activity. Well, you could, but that's not a very, that doesn't lead to really rapid learning. So these are ideas of how you can just accelerate learning. You'll see this experiential learning ideas in any kind of, any kind of learning, really. I'm a professional ski instructor, and I teach instructors. So in sports, and how we teach sports and how we teach groups, I mean, these ideas are like, really foundational. We do this all the time and organize activities along these cycles. But it's this idea that you have to do the activity, and then you have to reflect. Okay, think about the activity, and then it's like, okay, well, then what do I do? And then you sort of actively experiment. So within Agile, this means like you need to try something different, right? It's not enough to say, man, that sucked, that didn't work, that workflow was a problem. Okay, that's great, you identified the problem, you did your reflection, but then you need to like experiment, try something different, see if you can improve it. Okay, so there we go. So those hopefully gives you a little bit more insight into where these ideas come from, and really what these 4 key elements of Agile look like. Next week, when I go into Scrum and I show you Scrum, you're going to see that Scrum is like really like high power doing all of these things. And actually today, if like you sort of not Google Agile. Okay, so when I've talked with my friends who are in software development, if I say Agile, they're going to think, oh, you mean Scrum. So it's kind of been synonymous with Scrum, but it's not. But there are a lot of different frameworks for doing these Agile ideas that use these 4 principles. Okay. So yeah, just search, you'll find the various ones. It's kind of interesting looking at them. I'm going to focus on two really common ones, Kanban, and then next week I'll show you how to do a Scrum sprint and introduce you to that idea. The cool thing about these is they're all really quote unquote lightweight, so it's not that hard to implement them. So Kanban, nice thing about Kanban is you don't have to do anything really differently, except instead of keeping everything in your head or on in your notebook or emails or spread across, you Google Sheets, you're going to put it into a board so the whole team can see what's going on. And you're going to change one thing about maybe how you're doing it. And that is you're focusing on this idea of limiting work in progress. So remember, Agile is really focused on these iterative cycles. So it's not just that we do reflect and then do it again. We complete task. This is a key element of all these ideas is you get into a flow of completing things. So rather than like having a huge project and you just pick at it and that task, that huge thing just is never done until 6 months later the whole thing's done. You don't structure your work that way. You make a concrete task, like a day of work, 2 days of work, something, and you're going to focus and get that done. There's lots and lots of work showing that when we multitask, try to do a million things at once, that we get much less efficient, especially when it's a team working. The team gets really bogged down and inefficient if you do that. So Kanban gets you that because the Kanban board is visualizing everything you have going on and helps you discipline yourself and discipline the team in limiting what you're going to work on. So you have here, these are all the millions of things you need to do. And then you have, okay, these are the things I'm working on now. And here this number is what you allow for the work in progress. So here they're saying, okay, we're only going to allow the team 3 tasks that we're going to work on. These tasks may involve multiple people, but these are the only 3, and we're going to get these done, and then we're going to move them to the next column. And then each column will have a certain number of cards that it can have in it. So it kind of depends on like how many people are in these different columns, how many cards you can have in there. So this example I put up here is a case where the workflow has in progress, and then they have this project has a peer review. So you write something and then you hand it off to somebody else and they look at it, and then it goes on, and then it goes, and then somebody tests it. When we jump in and do some examples, we're just going to have in progress, which is maybe kind of the default way to start. And it's just how many columns you have and what the flow is like really depends on the project. Like you can't, there's no sort of general thing you can say there. It just depends on your project. But the key idea is that it flows from left to right. So this isn't like, different people. This is actually, this card needs to go here, and then it needs to go here, and needs to go there, and then done. If your project doesn't have that kind of, flowing, then, just having in progress is, fine. So why use the Kanban board, and why is this considered an agile framework? So first off, that team culture, team communication part, putting everything on the board is allowing the team to see everything that's happening. And if you can imagine, well, okay, so the board doesn't force you to do this, but what you're supposed to do is that the team would check in and look at the board every day. even better is if they look at it in person, they gathered and they said, talked about it. That's how you'd like to do it. But at least everyone's looking at it regularly. And the board is giving you a visual representation of the workflow. So I showed you that example where it's going from thing to thing. So if you saw that, oh wow, so the in review part is just like just backing up, then you would realize, oh wow, something's wrong here. Our reviewers are not reviewing fast enough, or maybe nobody wants to review, so nobody takes that on, or whatever. Like you had a problem with there. So then as a team, when you reflect, you're like, okay, we got to do something about that, because that review step is just backlogging everything, and it's adding a month to the project. Or it's adding a month to our paper publication rates, and we need to figure out, try something else, see if we can fix that. Okay, so that's that transparency aspect. And it's also encouraging you to be incremental. You do tasks, you focus on the task, get that done. Okay, but this is really different than Scrum in that there's no sprints, there's no time box task. It's just you have the task come in and then you grab them, focus on that task, get it done, move it across the board. So it's just kind of moving things across the board. Here's like one example of a Kanban board. So this is team one, but you could think of this as individuals. So this would be, if this is, 3 individuals on the team, you can see what everybody's to-do tasks are. You can see, how they're doing and moving things across. So able to visualize it. I also want to show you an example from a real example from my center. This is from the Ocean Acidification Lab, and they use a Kanban board to manage all the lab activities. So you can imagine a lab, there's tons of things going on. They have, things with personnel, field sensors, lab experiments. Also this is, oyster production down there. And they have a lot of different people involved. So the Kanban board helps the whole team see where they're at. They can prioritize things, set deadlines, and then pick things to be in progress and then get those done and just keep moving that. So you'll see here, it's not like everything is in progress. So this is a concrete example from a lab at my center. Okay, so now we're going to do this with GitHub. Let's jump on and see how to use GitHub project boards. So exit full screen. So I'm going to hop over here. I'm on GitHub now. This is the Math Bio program. This is my program at work. And I'm going to show you how I could create a Kanban board for my organization across multiple repositories. So I'm going to show you 2 different kinds of project boards, the classic and then the beta. I think for Kanban boards, really you want to be using the beta, but the classic one is might be a little bit easier entry to project boards, GitHub project boards, if you haven't used these before. The other thing I want to comment here is I'm teaching GitHub, so I'm showing how to do this with GitHub project boards, but there is tons of other software platforms. The most used one is called Jira. We have a license for that at NOAA, but it costs money. But it's great. It's got a lot of bells and whistles. However, I think that especially when you're starting, like focusing on the tool, the platform, Jira versus GitHub, that's not so important. It's really, focusing on the ideas and learning to get into this kind of flow of managing your work and planning, doing these cycles. Okay, I'm going to plan, think about how things went, do another plan do in these cycles. Okay, so let's see how we do this. I'm on an organization. If you're on your personal GitHub page, it'll look similar. Go up here, projects. Click that. So now over here, this beta is the new type of project boards. And this bottom one is the classic. So I'm going to go with the classic. So I just click that. And I am going to say new project. And did you that? Okay, yeah. So down here, so this is the beta one, and this is the old style classic. They say Kanban style. That's great. So I'm just here. Down here, template. You'll see you can make columns, but you can save yourself a little time if you do basic Kanban. I'll show you automation in a moment. Basic. I'll make it public so you can see it. All right, so the next question is links repositories. I am going to set this up. I'm going to pretend I'm making a project board for something to do with our work on these 5-year viability reports. And there are 2 repositories for that. So that one, so I can just search. You do have to know the name. Okay, so now I've linked 2 of these. This is just going to make it easier to pull in issues from the repositories. Okay, great. I'll show you, I'll demonstrate issues. If you weren't at the lecture when I talked about how to do GitHub issues, I'll show you that in just a moment. So there we go. So there's our Kanban board. We have our to-do, we have our in progress, and we have our done. I want to add a backlog. So our backlog is all the millions of things that we have to do, but we need to be organized here. So it's really important to sort of prune that down and decide, okay, at this point in time, which are the ones that we are actually going to choose from all the ones that we have. So it's really common to add a backlog. So that's how I do it. You just click that, add column, and then I would like to move it over. So move it, move it, move it. There we go. Okay, so it's going to be over here. All right, so now that's great. So I've got things kind of set up. It's telling me some helpful stuff here, which I always have to delete. Oh, a little bit of a hassle. It is helpful when you're starting, but afterwards it's get rid of it. Okay, so now I have a blank Kanban board. So now what do I do? And so now we want to start adding things that we want to work on. And so as the chat there, someone asked, well, do I have to add issues first? No, definitely not. You can just go here into the plus and say add a note. And this is task 1. And so I can just add them like this. I don't have to link it to issues at all. So just like that. So whatever works for you. However, if you are using issues, you're going to have a lot of fantastic features. And yes, I think that having a lot of them as issues is going to help you. And you're going to see why in just a moment, why those issues are really handy. But let's say you do have issues. So if you go, let's Let's do that. If I didn't have that up, you see this thing says add cards. What that's doing is, what that means is add issues. It's going to look at those repositories that I have in this organization, and it's going to suggest it for me. I made it a little easier on myself because I know I'm only looking at issues in these 2 repositories associated with this report, and it shows them all here. And now I basically move these over here into my backlog. Okay. Like that. And you just move them all over. Okay. So I'm now going to show you. I'm going to switch off this one. So adding all those issues there, that's going to be a little bit of a hassle. So I'm actually going to, I'm going to jump here where I've already added them in there. Okay, so there I already added all the cards. So same thing as I was doing, exact same thing, except before lecture I added all the cards. So now you see I've got this really long list of things. And one nice feature to know about is that you can add automation. If you click up here and say manage automation, you can say when you add issues to one of those 2 linked repositories, you want them to appear on the backlog. So you can say, hey, if I newly add ones, reopen them. If they're pull requests, you can do that. If you do that, however, I'm going to show you how to add an issue and add something that's going to appear on this backlog. Let me just show you how it works. So here are the 2 repositories. This one is our data going into these into this report, and I can do an issue here. So this is a task that I need to work on. Go here. Let's just say a test task. Just a test. Okay. So when I do this, if I just submit this, it's not going to show up automatically. I need to go here, projects, and actually put it in there. And so I need to know the name of it. I always forget this, and then I'm frustrated. Why did my task not show up? No, you actually have to select the project there. So there we go. So now it's going to show up. And now if I go back here, okay, sorry. You can have projects that are only associated with repositories. That can be confusing also. Sorry about that. In this case, I'm working on projects that are at the organization level. If you're not in an organization, you're just working on your own account, it's going to be at your account level. So here, these are project boards that can have issues coming from multiple repositories. And I'm down here, I'm in the classic one, and I'm here. So now I made that thing called test. Oh, come on. Hey, why didn't you show up? Oh, darn it. Okay, well, I must have picked the wrong project because I have so many. But if I picked the right project, what would happen is that it would show up way here at the bottom, down here. Okay, so then the next thing that you do is then you start grabbing your things, and this is called it's called, grooming your backlog. You figure out, of all these long things here, what's the next one to work on? So maybe I decide I grab that task and I start working on that. And then, I decide, okay, these are all the ones that I decide to work on. And there's really it's not a way that you automate this. This is part of those cycles that you do. You decide which are the things that are going to be in the to-do column. So these are the ones we're going to focus on, and we're going to get these done before we start grabbing new things. So this is the problem. Like this is trying to combat that situation where there are things that you say you need to get done, and then you never end up doing them. So here we're deciding these are things we need to get done, and then we're going to do them before we grab more things. So now we decide, okay, hey, this is me. I'm going to grab that, and I am going to click here. So now that I've grabbed it, now I can do some things. It didn't have an assignee, so I can say I'm going to assign myself. So that makes the team knows who's going to do this. Okay, so now we're working on that. And then as I work, I can open up. Blocked here. Okay. If I go down here, it says go to the issue. So now I can start to work, and there's some notes that were put in here. Thankfully, notes, because this was put in here back in April. I would have totally forgotten what I had to do here. These are all the things I need to be doing as I work, and I get stuck on something. I can say, hey, Mari, who I'm working, and ask a question, and that's going to ping Mari, and Mari can reply here, and we're going to have that thread about how I deal with this. We need to deal with this task right there. So that's really going to make us more efficient. So next thing is yes. Okay. Question about multiple repos in a single project board. Yes, absolutely. And I am in fact working at the organization level. And so I can have multiple repositories linked to this. You can also have a project board in your personal GitHub profile. So like if I go to EEHolmes, you can see here I can have projects, and these are this is kind of where I'm keeping track of what I'm doing. So this is my personal Kanban. This is my, well, actually I do more sprints. So, but this is where I do this, and this is like using issues from across everything that I'm doing in all my repositories. So you can do that either organization or your personal page. All right, so let's now switch to the beta project boards, and these I think are way more useful, especially if you're doing, I don't actually always use the beta, but if I'm doing something complex, I have multiple people, I'm trying to track multiple repositories, this the beta works. It has a lot more features, and let's see how to make this. Okay, so I did that. I'm going back here just to show you how you make one of these. Again, I'm going to go to projects, and I'm going to do new project, and I just click here, the beta, and now it gives me some options. It has some templates. I'm not going to use those right now. You could either be a board or a table. You can easily switch between these. It doesn't really matter which one you pick, but if you pick board, it's going to give you a basic Kanban with your to-do, in progress, and done. So we're going to start with that. So we just create that. There we go. And then we want to start adding things to the to-do. So this is a little different than the classic one. You can't just like pull these cards over. Instead, you go down here. It's not really that much harder. You do a $sign there, and it gives you all the repositories that you could choose from. So these are all the repositories in this organization. And let's say I'm doing a board that, again, is going to be focused on this report, viability report, and these are the two repositories associated with that. So I can click there, and now it shows me all the open issues. So I can just grab, you know, and it's great. You know, it makes it a lot easier. I can just like add all of them. That's nice. Ooh, I didn't want to add that one, but that's okay. So I just keep adding these. These ones with the check mark, those are done. So I don't want to add those. And then I can add the other repository, which is NWC trends. So let's add those two. So certain of these are various tasks out here. Okay. There we go. So now that's how we're going to add issues. When we, remember I showed you how to add a new issue and then you pick the project. So you do the same thing, but this time you'll pick the name of the beta, and then there'll be a drop down. It'll ask you which column you want to add it to. So when you create the new issue, you can have it appear, and you can have it appear in the correct column. Okay, so that doesn't really look different. Instead, to see what's different, we want to do a different view, and that's a table view here. So actually, I'm going to just name this table. Okay. So now I have a lot more options. Now things are going to start to get more useful. So I can go here and I can say, what do I want to see? I would like to see labels. Look at that. Now I see what are particularly, you know, what has to do data. You're going to learn about stories and epics next week. I want to know what repository it's in, and I want to know what milestone it is. So I organize my task, sort of my issues into milestones. So these are collected things like my next milestone for this has to do with documentation. So there's a series of tasks that are on milestone 20.3 that have to do with finishing up documentation. So I organize it that way, and then I'll have another milestone having to do with a different kind of theme of work. And that's how I like do my iterations. So I'm going to get done with milestone 3 before I start tackling the task in milestone 4. Now we can do something, a nice thing, which is we can start grouping. So these are called swim lanes. That's the low lingo for this in Kanban. And in here, it's going to be under group. And now I can group, and let's go group by repository. There we go. So now I can see all the outstanding things for my repository, and I can decide, you know, what I want to change to do. I can see who's working on it. There's a lot of things that are not assigned. Then a nice thing too here is I can do, it's really easy to like organize your task. So I can edit right here and decide, let's go over here. So here are my milestones. And maybe I decide, oh man, I am not going to get to that right now. Which one? Okay, maybe this one. I don't know. So I decide, I don't want to do that. And, you know, I can assign it to a different milestone. So that's really nice here. You don't have to go individually to each issue. You can just do it right there. You can, I think you can add labels. Can I add labels? Yeah, I can add extra labels to things. So that I find really helpful, adding those lanes. And you can just jump around and see group by different things. So I can group by assignees is a common one. You see who's, you know, not getting the work done or is swamped right now. Maybe you need to figure out how to offload a little bit. You can organized by your milestones, and so I can see all the things I'm planning here, and I could add a column and do priority, and that way I can start to sort them, and that helps me think about, okay, plan my work, figure out what do I need to do next. And last thing I want to show you is, let's go back to the board view. So one thing you can do here that is nice is you can filter by, like here, let's do milestone. I don't know if I have any things that are bugs. Maybe they're bugs. No, I don't. Data? Yeah. I don't know why that's saying that. Okay. So these are all the things that have to do with data. So you filter your board like that. And so that can be, again, nice for helping you plan your work. Although personally, I find it easier just to hop onto table, say, and then I could go here and do group by. I don't have label here, but I could add label as, oh no, it's not allowing me to do that. I don't know why. Huh. Maybe I can't group by label. Interesting. But definitely over in the board view, I can see just that. Okay, very last thing, how do you delete a project? Because I just created this thing that I don't actually need. So I go on here, back here, and where is it? Over there, settings, jump down to the bottom, and you can delete it. You could close it, but in this case, I mean, it was just garbage, so I'm just going to delete it. And it warns you that this is, can't get this back. And there we go. Okay, so yeah, that was our whirlwind tour of the thinking behind Agile, and also to Kanban with GitHub project boards. I encourage you, just start playing with it. That's how you learn. Remember, the idea is you're going to do these short learning cycles. Don't get hung up on like trying to be perfect. Just start by learning, then reflect. Okay, how could I make that board a little better? Maybe I'll try something different. Experimentation is really important there. Just keep trying new things. And yeah. Okay, that is the end of lecture. I will stay on and just answer questions that come up in the chat, and I'll review through the chat here. Okay. I can open this up here. Yeah, Catherine's comment about the beta projects being really helpful for prioritizing issues. I find that also. Like I said, if it's bigger, it's multiple repositories, multiple people, and lots of different issues, the new project boards can really, really help. The old ones, like I said, I still use them, but I'll use it on a single repository. And so where I don't have, there's not as much action happening, and I'll use the old ones a lot for that. And the reason I do that is that I mean, I could do that with the new version, to absolutely could. But you'll notice if you're on a repository and you want to add a project, if you try to add the new version, the beta, it says, oh, you first must add it at the organization level. And I find that irritating, so I just use the classic one. Can you migrate a project to beta? I don't know that. I've never tried to do that. Yeah, I think, yeah, search online. I'm not sure you Well, I hope you could, especially if you have a lot of cards that are not tied to issues. If yours are tied to issues, then it's going to be pretty easy just to kind of recreate it. It won't be that hard. But if you have cards that are not issues, like it's a note, then yeah, that's going to be a bit more work to manually switch it over.
And Eli, I'm still on. I think mine was
Yeah.
the next question.
Uh-huh.
So mine was about, I can see when you had that beta, you said, oh, I want to link to all these repositories and then you can search the issues. But I
Mm-hmm.
guess what I'm trying to get at is, if each of those projects have their own project board and they've already done their own prioritization in terms of this is going to be backlog, this is what we're going to be working on, and it has the person assigned to it. I was trying to think of a way or ask if there was a way to have a project board that I could see on specific like team members that are in multiple projects that have their own project boards. Can I just have a dashboard to see where everybody's at in their different projects? Because there's external people to my team that are on those project boards who have collaboratively made those project boards to track their work. But there are several of those projects, and is there a way to just look at it from one without recreating? Because I don't want to recreate or say, hey, you're going to do this next when that individual repo project board has that on backlog.
Yes. So I think you need to set up a project board that is tracking all of the repositories. And yes, so you can have an issue appear on multiple project boards.
Right.
So, and it is going to feel like extra work. However, it will enable you to do something you can't do now, which is track that person's work across all their repositories. So I can, okay, so I'm here. I can group by assignee. Mine's not going to look that interesting here because I just have me and then a whole bunch of unassigned things. But you can imagine you have multiple people. You can see everything they're working on. You can add columns for whatever you need to see, repositories, whatever extra labels that you're adding. And I think there's going to be a way that, so this to-do status, I'm not sure how you'll do that. So as they move, like they move something from doing it to in progress, you
Yeah,
would like that to appear here for you, I'm guessing.
right, but and it's not so much to like track, you know, people. Well, yeah, I mean, it's just a way to say I don't know if if on that project board where that issue is and that project team, if that's a to do, if it's bringing it into this project board that's separate. I'm just bringing in all these issues, but to me, it'll just be all to do. But I have no idea what's been completed on their individual project boards, and I certainly don't want to have to update two project boards and moving cards and issues to completion.
Right. So this having one that's like this, you could have that, have the set it, let's say you had like at the org level, you had this, and we want to filter this view. So you kind of set it up. Okay. EEHolmes, okay. Save changes. So now you imagine that now this is EEHolmes. So this is me. And now instead of going to my individual project boards, I go here, and this is where I'm managing things. And I can do everything that I could do on the project board for the individual repos. I can do it all here. And this is actually probably a little better for me because I can see all my project boards together, and I can say, okay, yeah, this is the thing I'm going to work on. And I move that like that. So you would have, for each person, you have their own tab here, and they just go here and they go to their tab.
And does that show the status on that project board of that individual repo, or do they have to mark it as complete in both project boards?
So they're only going to have one project board, and it's going to be this one. And this project board has all their info on it.
So that doesn't work because they're going to be part of other teams and other repos that are external to our branch. And so
I see,
they're going to need their own project boards with external people. And that's where I think it makes more sense to do the project board is at that team project level. But I'd like to be able to see across projects, my team's, tasks to make sure, that they're not have too much on their plate.
Right. Yeah. So I know that like in Jira, you can do that.
Okay.
That's
Okay, but not in GitHub. Okay. Well,
I don't know. There may be a way to do it. I haven't done it, so I don't know. Yeah, there may be. I think it just takes some experimentation to see if that's possible.
Okay, thank you so much, Eli. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, Eli or Vivian,
Yeah.
I was gonna, in that question there that Vivian had, about kind of keeping track of the status, am I correct though, that as long as everything is an issue, then as an individual closes an issue, then it would be moved to being done.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that they would be manually going in and moving an issue card from one portion of the board to the next. You would just use the automation aspect in GitHub so that when an issue was closed, it was moved to the other status.
Oh,
So
that's
that
true.
might
Thanks,
get
Chris.
at what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Are there different statuses on the issues? I don't remember off the top of my head all of the statuses. Maybe just the status of the issue rather than on the status in a different project. Because the other thing
I
too,
think like
they'll have different columns. Each project could put their own column. So maybe just using issue status.
I think if I think like an issue as itself is either closed or open, but when you associate it with a project, it has this other status category, and as long as that status transfers across different boards, then I would think you might get there. It just might. I bet somewhere on the internet there's a blog post that tells you how to do this.
Yeah. So if I think like I changed this issue to revamp, this code, and I changed the status to in progress, and that's appearing on the issue. So I think, yeah, here, let's notification. Do I see status? No, it's specific to the board. So you can see here, this, I have 2 projects. So this is a classic one that's, you know, a different project board, and the status for this one is backlog. And on this board, status is in progress. Milestone is carrying over, but this status seems to be project specific.
Yeah, so you might have to leverage labels or something, you know, come up with a, you know, your team or whatever would come up with a consistent definition of labels that could somehow be leveraged. But I mean, all of this probably takes a bit more work than we would like, but it's probably possible.
Yeah, and you know, the last 2 comments there were, you know, bringing up Jira, which I said we have a NOAA license for, and there's Trello. So if you're finding that this kind of management is really important for your team, then beginning to learn, I would say, yeah, one of those. I say you know, I'm leaning towards Jira just because we have a license for that at NOAA. And also, you know, talking with my friends in industry, well, they use Jira a lot. Anyhow, that's the last one that I'm going to be using, learning to be able to do more complex tracking across different teams. But it costs money. It's another thing to learn. If you're already using GitHub project boards, then yeah.